the Couture 303 podcast with Jay Viper.
Welcome back to the show, guys, and welcome to 2024. After a brief break for Christmas and New Year, I hope you're all fully refreshed. Kicking off the year, we have got one of the most talented hard house producers the UK has ever seen, who's more recently branched off into a different genre. We'll go into that a little bit later. Please welcome to the show, the one and only Mr. Paul Maddox.
Morning, how are you? You good?
I tell you what, and I said it off camera before, what a pleasure it is to have someone with such a fucking good setup like that.
Well, thank you. Hopefully it'll keep working for the full duration of the podcast. It doesn't break. I'll look like I don't know what I'm doing then. But yeah, it's all good for now.
You put a 50 in the meter, yeah?
You are? Yeah, 50 in the meter, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right, so as we always do with all my guests, Paul, we start at the very, very beginning. So the first question I ask everybody, where and when were you born, mate?
I was born in 1983 in a town called Chesterfield in Derbyshire, which is kind of like between Sheffield and Derby, I guess, East Mids. But I've lived up in Yorkshire in various bits since I left home. But yeah, so sort of Midlands stroke Yorkshire, that's my home.
I've actually DJ'd in Chesterfield. I think it was either Uprising or Revolution.
Oh god, yeah, back in the day, it was. I think that was basically by the time I was going out in Chesterfield, there wasn't really much other than like Bondi Beach Bar and just basically places where they'd serve you underage. But it was, But I mean, thankfully, it was a pretty good location, really. Like we used to go Progress in Derby all the time, which was only like half an hour away, and Gatecrasher in Sheffield and stuff. So it wasn't a bad location for sort of early clubbing experiences. To be fair,
yeah, I think it was 90. I'm going to say 98, 99. I played once when it was called Uprising.
Yeah.
And I played again when it was called Revolution. And I get mixed up which was Sheffield, which was Chesterfield.
I think, I think Uprising was Sheffield. Whether they did events in Chesterfield as well or not, they may well have done. But Uprising was definitely Sheffield based, yeah.
Yeah. I was actually in the army as well when I was 17. I was in Richmond.
Right.
North Yorkshire.
Yeah. So that's closer to where I am now, actually. I'm kind of up sort of Leeds, Bradford way now. So that's, I'm closer to that side now than I was.
My first ever tattoo was at the White Shops in Richmond shops. Anyway. Little bit of history for you there. So what was school like for a young Paul?
Do you know what? It was all right. I was a pretty quiet kid, but like sort of early school, didn't love it, to be honest. But then sort of when you get into sort of the second half of secondary school, got a good group of mates that, were all into music, all sort of when we were doing our A-level, started going out, like I said, Progress, Gatecrasher, all those kind of places. And so sort of first part, I mean, I was quite a studious kid, I guess, but didn't really love it. Yeah. But yeah, then as I hit my teens, sort of found a good circle of mates and sort of settled into it a bit, really. Yeah.
What was it you didn't like about school?
I don't know. I guess I'm kind of naturally, or certainly I was when I was younger, like quite a shy person, like not a particularly outgoing person, which obviously that's changes as you get older, doesn't it? But yeah, just didn't naturally sort of mix with people well, and just like was kind of quite just a quiet kid, really. I wasn't like painfully shy, right? But just I was as happy sort of sitting down and doing something by myself that I wanted to do as I was having to have conversations with other people, basically.
So what's your home life like as a child? Are you an only child, or
no? There's two of us. There's me and my little sister. She's 2 years younger than me. And had a good upbringing. Great parents. Just sort of normal. Middle class suburban upbringing, I guess. We didn't struggle, but weren't minted out either. Do you know what I mean? But did all right. I never struggled. We were all good. But yeah, it just a nice home life, really. Yeah.
And when you said before about being shy, obviously the first time I encountered you was at a Tidy weekender, and obviously at the time you were still basically a fucking kid. You and Guyver were like fucking. You must have been 17, 18 back then.
Yeah, I think guys a year younger than me, I think, or maybe two. Yeah, so like I started doing the Tidy stuff probably when I was about 17, 18. So Guy would have then been 16, 17 at the same point. Yeah.
Yeah, you both came across as really shy back then as well.
Yeah.
So go on.
No, so go, mate. It's all good. Yeah, it's all good.
So you obviously you met this new group of. So what was your musical influence like as a kid? What's your parents listen to? Obviously, you've got a younger sister, not an older sister. So
yeah, so parents were both really into music. To be honest, neither of them musical in terms of being musicians or anything like that. It wasn't a musical household in that sense, but there was always music about. They were both, music was a big thing for both of them. like quite varied, really. You know, like my mum was quite into a lot of, you know, the sort of late 70s, early 80s sort of new wavy sort of stuff, like, you know, Adam and the Ants, Human League, all that sort of stuff. My dad was more of a rocker, like loved his glam rock and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, really varied, to be honest. So yeah, they both they both got great record collections. So it was yeah, I was never short of. There wasn't much electronic musical influence other than, you know, those sort of 80s new wavy bits, but equally there was plenty of music around. You know, I always grew up with music being an important thing in your life.
It's quite a staple. I mean, obviously, myself, obviously, I've never reached the heights you've reached, but as a DJ, I think when you're introduced to music younger, like you just alluded to there, my mum liked glam rock. So I got to listen to glam rock, you know, Gary Glitter, unfortunately.
Hey, some good tunes. Say what I mean. Like clearly not a good person, but you can make some good tunes. Yeah.
That cunt's robbed us of a fucking fantastic Christmas song.
Totally agree.
Totally agree. So I got to listen to glam rock, T-Rex and stuff like that.
Yeah, T-Rex is a big one. Yeah.
And then obviously got introduced myself when I was a kid, early 80s. I loved Adamant. I thought Adamant was the fucking best thing since sliced bread. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
I started to branch out more on the rock scene. Obviously, for me, the mid 80s, I was 10 years of age. So AC/DC, Guns N' Roses were all fucking really big at the time. So I went down that avenue. So when did your musical taste sort of develop into? Was it when you met this group of friends, or was it before that?
No, probably a little bit before, actually. So more just hearing stuff on the radio, you know, listening to your, you know, Judge Jules's and Pete Tongs and the Dave Pearce, even, you know, the sort of, you know, commercial end of dance music that was on mainstream radio at the time. And then from that, ended up buying a few, you know, really mainstream compilation albums, you know, like Ministry of Sound, Ibiza Annuals, and I think the Annual 3 was the first one, that kind of stuff. And kind of buying those comps for one of the more cheesy tracks that was on it, you know, that I'd heard on the TV ad or whatever, but then actually listening to the rest of it and getting exposed to a load of stuff that was, you know, still not super underground, but much more underground than, you know, Dario G Sunshine or whatever it was that I bought the comp for. So they were a really good eye opener, you know, because I'd buy it for the sort of more commercial tracks, and then sort of get into this, and I'm like, I can't remember which one it was now, but the hard floor mix of Morikante, Yaki Yaki was on there. And I remember hearing that. I think it was a Dave Pearce Dance Anthem CD. And I remember listening to that on there and being like, what the hell is this? You know, being a proper like mind blown moment. Like, you know, sort of with my Discman and my earbuds in, walking to school, listening to that and being like, what the hell is this? You know, it was a real like, and I've always been quite when I'm into something, I'm really into it. You know, like, no, I wouldn't go as far as saying obsessive necessarily, but like, you know, if I find a new artist, I want to find their whole back catalogue, and you're like, okay, where did they start? What's their origin story? You know, like, I want to find the whole lot.
Yeah. Right.
So I remember with a few artists, you know, like Hard Floor, BT, a few of the trance guys, you know, being in that sort of mindset and being like, you know, like, cool, I love this one track, so I now need to find out everything else that, you know, that they've ever done, basically. So
your audio's okay, but your video's paused.
Has it right? Bear with me 2 seconds, mate. It's this. I told you. It's because you complimented me on my good camera. Hang on, bear with me 2 seconds. I've got a normal webcam here. Let me just switch it over.
Go on, mate. Thank you. The Couture 303 podcast is now officially sponsored by Dapper Turkish Barbers in Hunts Cross. You can find them on Wood End Avenue, and they do the full service there. The hair, the beard, the ears, the nose, the cutthroat, hot towels, the lot. It's the only barbers I ever go to. Fantastic service, great lads. No need to book, just pop in and see them 7 days a week. If you want a nice sick fade like mine, you will not be disappointed. The absolute best in the area. That's Dapper Turkish Barbers, Wood End Avenue, Hunts Cross. And now back to the show.
There you go. Not quite as nice, but it's working. So I've even got a backup camera. There you go. How's that?
I'll tell you what, fucking hell, you're putting me to shame here, mate.
There we go. Not quite as nice of an angle, but never mind. We can live with it.
Listen, we're not here to look at you, Paul. No offence.
That's fine. You wouldn't have had me on if you were.
So you start buying these compilations, and like a lot of people, as you just said, then you buy it for the tracks, you know, and then you get introduced to new stuff, and then you start to delve into their back catalogue and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I'm guessing music production was first for you rather than DJing. Am I right?
Correct. Yeah. Always been into music, but production came before DJing. So I've always been like, you know, I was quite a geeky kid, you know, so I was always into messing around, doing stuff on the computer, you know, whether that was, you know, gaming or, you know, doing bits of web design or whatever, you know, I was just a bit of a geeky kid, basically. And then got into, I think it was probably, I don't know if you remember Dance Ejay.
Yeah, it was
on the PC and the PlayStation and stuff, and it was literally like a drag and drop, you know, put your
Lego bricks.
yeah, exactly. It was like dance music Lego, exactly. but yeah, started messing around with that, and I was like, oh, this is ace, love this. You know, it's kind of combining two things that I really liked. You know, I was getting into dance music. I always liked sort of fiddling around doing creative stuff, you know, with computers and that. So yeah, and then that led on to there's a program called Acid, which was by Sonic Foundry. Sony bought it later. And then started using that to do just sort of little bootlegs, you know, sort of Toka's Miracle type stuff, you know, like throwing an a cappella over a track kind of thing, and just having a bit of mess around with that. Yeah, and then from there started like sort of writing extra little bits to, you know, to add to it, and sort of it grew from there really. So yeah, and just found that I enjoyed it basically, and and eventually got all right at it. Not to start with, like you don't want to hear any of those early demos.
So obviously when you start off with dance, I think I had Dance Ejay, Hip Hop Ejay, Rave Ejay, Techno Ejay. Yeah. I had the lot. Only about £35 as well. When you got loads of samples as well. And remember the magazine.
Yeah, I think that's what I got originally. It was like a free version on like PC Gamer or something like that. I can't remember what magazine, but yeah, it was like a cover mount CD, definitely.
Yeah. So obviously you started making like bootlegs, remixes, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
So can you remember the first time you made something and actually had a bit of success or a bit of you know?
Definitely. Well, there was a few that I'd done, and I'd just literally like going out around bars in town in Chesterfield. You know, giving into a few of the resident DJs that you saw every week there, and getting these odd little bits played out in there, and that was a buzz. You know, even if it was to like 20 people in the Barking Badger or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But even so, you know, it's like something I've made is getting played to people I don't know. You know, that was a buzz. But then it's not long after that. It was before the whole Tidy thing, at least. On Galaxy 105, which was the sort of local dance music radio station. I think it was Galaxy 102 over in Manchester and Liverpool. The 105 was Yorkshire. And DJ on there called Alex Pepper had he did the sort of after the drive time show, like the early evening show. And had this feature on there called Fly or Die. And basically young producers, or up and coming producers, I guess, not necessarily young, would send in, you know, tracks which tended to be sort of mash-uppy, bootleggy type things rather than originals generally. And they'd play two, one after the other. People would phone in. I was maybe text in, trying to think, was text a thing then? Anyway, people would get in touch, and you'd vote which one, you know, which was the fly and which was the die, basically. And if you won the most, you got played again the following day. So this bootleg that I did of Belinda Carlisle, Heaven is a Place on Earth, which
nice.
Back now ain't that great, but at the time I thought it was amazing. Yeah, it was on there for like a week or something. And it was just a little, you know, having something played on the radio when I was like, well, I think I must have been, 16 or 17 probably. It was like quite a big deal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I was like, do you know what? There's maybe something in this.
Yeah. So what did you make? Was that made on Acid or did you progress by then?
So I think that was Acid, but that was kind of the point where I'd been adding, you know, rather than it just being an a cappella chucked over a track, I was sort of writing new elements. So doing it more as a proper remix rather than a bootleg, rather than a mashup. I think I was using Acid, but then I was also using Fruity Loops as it was then, but to sort of make loops that I'd then load into Acid. So the way I was doing it was a bit sort of cack-handed, and probably, you know, looking back, there was probably much better ways of doing it, to be honest. But yeah, I was just sort of, it was before you could go on YouTube and get amazing tutorial videos of everything, you know. So there was a lot of just sort of experimenting and finding your own way of doing things, really.
Yeah. Okay. So you alluded to Fruity Loops there. Were you on Fruity Loops for a while, was you?
I never used it as my main package. So because the really early versions of Fruity Loops, I've no idea what number it was, but it was definitely pre-FL Studio. It was when it was actually just called Fruity Loops.
Yeah.
And it didn't really, like the sequencer and stuff, it didn't have like a proper arrange page like it does now. You know, it was more for making, it was a bit more like an 909 or something, you know, so you could make patterns and then you could string patterns together, but there wasn't like an arrange view, you know, where you could lay it out. Or if there was, I never found it.
Yeah.
There'll probably be someone in the comments now saying, I used Fruity Loops one, there wasn't the arrange page, but I never found it if there was.
Someone will out-nerd you.
Mate, I don't doubt it. Like it's, so I was kind of using Acid as the sequencer, Fruity Loops for kind of making just drum loops and stuff that I loaded into Acid. And then there was another, like an early soft synth called Dream Station that was like a sort of virtual analog synth thing, and like not a very good one. So I was using that for extra sort of synth bits. So it was a bit of a weird sort of hodgepodge of bits chucked together. But yeah, because there was no real good guides out there, and I didn't know anyone else who was a producer at this point, you know, so I didn't have any peers to kind of learn off, which is the, you know, one of the best ways of learning, really.
Of course,
So yeah, it was very much me just sort of scrabbling around in the dark a little bit and finding like a way that sort of worked. Yeah.
So at this point, had you had any interest in DJing at all?
Not really. Like,
No.
I understood DJ culture and stuff. Yeah, but we were only, because I was, like I said, I was probably 16 or 17 at this point. So, and as a 16-year-old, I probably looked about 14. So, like, getting into any proper clubs was not an option for me at that point, unfortunately. Like, even a fake ID out the back of FHM wasn't going to get me anywhere at that point. So my experience of it was, like cheesy clubs in the town centre, basically, was my experience of it.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't really get into being a DJ, even though I'd been watching DJs like this. So fast forward, a few years till I'm actually, where I'm doing Progress and Gatecrasher and those kind of places. And obviously, like, respected the DJs and admired what they did, but I was still more interested in making tunes, to be honest, than being a DJ myself. And it wasn't really until the Tidy thing happened, and I started, basically because I had a few tracks out, people wanted to book me. And I wasn't even a DJ at that point. So I was like, but quite a few of my mates were at this point. So I was like, but then I was like, right, okay, I need to learn how to do this.
So you touched on the excuse me, you touched on the Tidy thing there. Yeah. How did that all come about? Because obviously, for a lot of my viewers on this podcast, and for myself especially, I was introduced to you via Tidy. I think Tidy Became the Fire was my first one, and you were well established by then as a producer and a DJ. So how did that all come about?
So I kind of, like I was saying before, I was giving out my demos of my little bootleggy things around, like sort of clubs and stuff in Chesterfield. Then fast forward a couple of years, I've actually got a bit of more of a better setup. I'm making actual original tracks. I mean, they were quite sample heavy, but they were a bit more than just mashups. And was getting into hard house at this point. So we'd seen like the Tidy Boys and Andy Farley and these kinds of DJs at like Progress in Derby. And there was actually another club in Mansfield, which was closer to us, called One Love, which was only around for a relatively short period of time. But they had, it was primarily hard house lineups. They'd have Tidy Boys, Glasby, Rachel Orban, those kind of names on. I'd always burn off some CDs of what I've been working on and give them to the DJs. Gave this demo that had 5 or 6 tracks on it, I think, to Andy and Ammo, the Tidy Boys, when they were playing at One Love. Didn't hear anything back, which I hadn't done from anyone else who I'd given it to, so I wasn't massively surprised by it. I'd kind of like, you get used to rejection early in this business, so I'd kind of like, I was already like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever, that's how it goes.
Even back then, the Tidy Boys were pretty much the fucking top of the mountain, man. They were the big boys, like, even then.
100%. And so then, probably, I can't remember exactly how long, but a good while after I gave them this demo CD anyway, like at least a couple of months. I came home from my Sunday job working at a butcher's shop. I had a voicemail on my Siemens C25, and I'm sort of saying the picture. It's a long time ago. It was voicemail from Ammo from the Tidy Boys saying we love the demo you've given us, particularly the Entrance Set You Free bootleg, and we'd like you to come into the studios and sort of work on sort of giving it a bit of extra polish with us in the Tidy Studios, which obviously for me, who had never seen it really as anything more than a hobby that I really enjoyed at that point, was a big like, oh, wow, and
you're still 16, 17 at this point?
I think 17, yes. Wow. I must have still been in sixth form because I was still doing my Sunday job. So I would have been 17, I reckon, yeah.
Fucking hell, getting a voice message off the Tidy Boy saying...
Yeah, it was like, it was madness. However long later, a few weeks later, went and did a studio session with them, did a bit of tweaking to the track, got it sounding a little bit better than what I'd done on my very, sort of very primitive little setup that I had at home. And it kind of also turned out that they were looking for somebody to work in the studio it wasn't officially an internship, but it was effectively that, they were looking for somebody up and coming to come and work in the studio, do some, because at that point in time, a lot less stuff was automated, so a lot of they needed a bit of a studio dog's body to burn CDs and do, just general like studio admin kind of stuff, really, someone who knew what they were doing from a technical point of view to a point, but wasn't above doing, quite menial tasks, which was fine, I guess it was kind of the equivalent of, people who come up through
an apprenticeship, basically.
Yeah, well, and also, people who go and then work as, just work as the T-boy or the runner in a TV studio.
Just to get in the industry,
it's that kind of thing, putting yourself in a position where you're around the right people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was such a great opportunity. I'm eternally grateful to them for it, really, because any time when I wasn't doing those bits, I was free to just use this really, really good studio as much as I wanted to, and and learn my craft, really. I had people like Ammo around who are great producers. There was a load of other people at Music Factory who did the non-tidy stuff as well, because they did Pure Energy, which was gym music, and they did these sort of carbon copies that were like cover versions and stuff. So there was a few other really talented producers outside of the tidy thing in that environment. So it was a really good place to be. Like if I got stuck with someone, I could go and knock on the studio next door and ask, whoever was working in there, like, just, ask little questions, which again, pre-YouTube, was invaluable, like now, and I'd still rather get advice off a real person, but at least now, you can search kind of like, all right, how do I do this? And you'll get probably a decent answer off the internet. Whereas that wasn't really an option then, so being around people who knew that stuff that I wanted to learn was an amazing opportunity. Yeah.
Did you find as well that you with your limited resources back then, did you find when you were mixing with the likes of Ammo and Andy and these other guys, did you find that you knew more than you actually thought you knew?
Definitely, yeah, because I mean, I was still, I'd read all the manuals, I'd read all the, and although there wasn't the internet resources that there are now, there was still forums and there was still, there was stuff out there. It was more reading rather than watching videos, obviously. But yeah, I would go out there and, hog the phone line at my mum and dad's house, going on like, various sort of music tech forums and things like that, trying to learn everything that I could. But yeah, I mean, they obviously thought I knew what I was on about well enough to give me the shot that they gave me. So yeah, I must have picked up more than I thought I had, I guess. Yeah.
So if my research is correct, your first release on Tidy was Revolution and Raid. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Do you remember how that came about? And do you remember how excited you were when you got?
Yeah. Well, so the Entrance thing had come out before, which Tidy did as like a sort of bootleg white label thing. So that was the first one. And then that got picked up for a proper release afterwards. But yeah, Revolution and Raid were the first two originals. And to be honest, obviously that was the goal as soon as I started working there, to have a single out or have an EP out, whatever. And it took me quite a long time. I did quite a lot of stuff and they knocked quite a lot of stuff back, which was a good, for good reasons. It wasn't good enough.
Standards are very high at Tidy. Let's be
totally,
honest.
And they weren't going to, just because they'd sort of taken a punt on me, they weren't going to just put like any old shit out because just because I was their guy.
Their reputation on the line as well, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, oh totally. And it was good, because that's one thing that I'd never. Prior to that, I'd always just been doing what I fancied doing and seeing what other people thought of it. Whereas, working with people who were the A&R guys at the end of the day, and having to learn how to take people's feedback on board and learn how to, but it made me improve, like the ideal that you just do what you want isn't the case. To a point, you've got to be your own person, you've got to be your own artist, but you've also got to please the people who are signing it, so there's it was a really good learning experience, to be honest.
Yeah, I think with anything like that, like you've alluded to there, it's hard to take criticism when you've had no criticism before, and obviously you're wise enough to realise that the people who you're getting criticism off know what they're talking about.
Definitely.
So if Amadeus Mozart says it's not good enough, you'll take that on board. If some knobhead on the message board says, he's probably just chatting out of his arse, isn't he?
Yeah. And the thing is also, it's constructive criticism as well. Like if someone just tells you it's shit, even if they're right, that isn't very helpful.
No.
Whereas
why do you think it's shit?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like if they told me like your kick's shit and the riff's out of key, then that's useful feedback.
Exactly,
you still don't want to hear it, but at least you know what you need to improve. Then, do you know what I mean? Yeah.
But even on that scale, though, was it tough to take a bit of rejection, a bit of criticism in the early days?
It was definitely it's funny though, because at that point I was still pretty bowled over that I was even kind of making a career out of this thing. It wasn't like I was some, prima donna artist who had my vision or anything like that. I was well aware that I still had a lot to learn. Yeah. But equally, up to that point, all I'd had really was sort of playing the stuff to my mates and my mates saying it was ace, which is what happens.
We've all got that. I think, it's boss, that's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly, which is nice. And I probably had it not been for that encouragement from my friends early on, I would never have had the confidence to get, to push through that anyway.
You'll never improve. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, it served a purpose having people saying, they thought stuff was great. But actually then when someone who does it as a job and really knows their onions is telling you what's wrong with it, it is a bit of a, it's still, do you know what? It still stings now.
Yeah,
if I've made something now, 20 years later or 20 odd years later, if I've made something that I think's bob on and somebody who I respect tells me they don't like it, I still don't like it. It's like, I'll accept it and I understand, and I'll take a step back and take a deep breath and think about it and do it. But there's still a little bit of you that's like, that's my baby.
They're your kids, aren't they? You're
kicked
exactly your fucking kids, aren't they?
Yeah.
No one wants to be told the kid's ugly.
Exactly. So yeah, like you learn to deal with it, but it's I think if it doesn't piss you off a bit when people say they don't like something, I think it means you probably don't care about what you created in the first place.
There, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
So were you in the? I'm guessing you were in the fold from Tidy Weekender 1.
I was. So
were you aware of the conversations when that was getting planned and stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. So, because I was working in the studio, which was at the offices, there was 2 buildings, but that we were all, we all went for lunch together. The whole team was all basically, in the same place at the same time. And actually, the first weekender was my first proper gig, really. So I'd done a couple of really small gigs before that. Like I can't remember exactly what they were, but really small. They were hard house gigs, but they were quite small. And at the weekender 1, there was supposed to be a sort of new talent room upstairs. I think they stopped using that room after weekend 3 or maybe 4, but there was a little room upstairs, sort of above reception at Prestatim, that they stopped using. But the new talent room was in this little room upstairs. So I was supposed to be playing there on the Sunday. And obviously that was pretty nerve-wracking anyway, playing at the first weekend of full stop. But on the sort of Sunday afternoon, Jez and Charlie had phoned up to say that they couldn't make their set, which was opening the main room on the Sunday, and I got drafted in to cover their set.
Wow!
So it went from being like in the little room that I was like, it's probably not going to be that many people there, it'll be all right, to actually doing the main room at the weekend. So it was quite a big. It was a bit of a baptism of fire, but it was good. Yeah, it was a really really good experience.
Sorry, go on.
No, yeah, but I was then just going to come on to you were saying about. I realised I'd sort of sidetracked slightly about the sort of formation of the idea for the weekend. Yeah, There's actually a guy called Richard Scaife, who I think
I remember Richard Scaife.
Yeah, he was the. Can't remember what his exact job title was. It might have been events manager. Or it might have been something a bit broader than that. But it was his idea basically. He'd seen that the obviously things like the Southport Weekender and the Northern Soul Weekenders and stuff like that, and basically applying that idea to the Tidy fan base, which was, I think everyone, as soon as he sort of floated it, everyone was like, why has no one thought of that before?
Exactly, yeah.
Like, so yeah, it was a wicked buzz, like leading up to that first one, everyone was just like, yeah, this is going to be so good. And it was, to be fair.
Like I say, my first one was Tidy Weekender 5, and I was actually discussing this with my missus, Jenny, this weekend, actually. We were talking, my missus is 11 years younger than me, so obviously rave culture is not really a big thing for me missus.
Yeah.
But obviously, since I've started getting back into DJ and she's come to gigs with me and she's seen a bit of different side and stuff. But I was discussing with her, like the first time I ever went to the Drome in Birkenhead, which is my go-to club. I remember thinking I was blown away by it, and there was nothing as good as it until the first time I walked into a Tidy Weekender. And I always remember we walked into the main room, Tidy Weekender 5. I think let's say it starts at 6 o'clock. We must have walked in about 8 o'clock, so it was full.
Yeah.
I remember walking in, feeling this atmosphere, seeing these lasers, and literally like getting emotional. It was fucking incredible. It was the biggest thing I've ever been to, like size wise. I never went to like Gate Crash, and I've been to Cream, but Cream wasn't as big when I went to it. But the walking into the main room, Tidy Weekender 5. Feeling that atmosphere, seeing them lights and lasers, hearing that music, it was a fucking life-changing moment. It really was.
They were absolutely incredible. Yeah, and I'm like, really sort of proud to have done all of the Tidy Weekenders. Like, I don't think there's that many DJs who've done every single one.
Tidy boys, there's probably only you, maybe.
Yeah, I think there might be one. Yeah, it might be one because I think there was a little period where they did these like atomic weekenders that were kind of like a spin-off thing. I didn't do all of those, but all the ones that were called Tidy Weekender, I did. Yeah, I maybe there's one ideal one I didn't do actually, but I did all the Tidy ones. So yeah, it's kind of sort of weaved along with my career really, because they both kicked off at more or less the same time really, with give or take a year or so.
Yeah. So with music production, am I right in saying you may not be the only one, but you're probably one of the only ones who's had a release on Tidy Untidy and Tidy 2. Is that right?
Yeah, do you know, I'd never thought about that before, but you're probably
There's not
right,
many.
actually. Yeah. Yeah, probably true.
And what was, did you have a favourite back then of style?
So, do you know, I've always liked a sort of a broad cross-section of music, full stop, really. You know, like hard house and hard trance has always only been one bit of what I like anyway. You know, like obviously it was the bit that had a lot of focus for a long time. But, you know, I always listen to other music at the same time as that. And it's just whatever the mood takes me, really. There was, I think, certainly the Tidy 2 thing, because it was when Guy sort of arrived as at Tidy, and suddenly he turned up with this demo CD of like literally 20 amazing hard trance tracks. And I was like, wow, this guy's like, you know, I was like, right, okay, I'm like I was a Hot Property 6 months ago, and like this kid's looking better than me, like, And yeah, I think that was definitely there was a bit of me being like, yeah, I reckon I can write a hard trance record, which was what Reach Out ended up being. So, and it wasn't as good as one of Guy's, to be fair, but it was, but yeah, that was I think sort of absorbing other influences and seeing what other people are doing can be a bit of healthy competition, can be a good thing sometimes.
Of course, yeah. Reach Out's a fucking belter sack, by the way.
It's quite a different tune as well, because I think that's the funny thing. You try and emulate what somebody else does, and you don't really get it right, but it kind of has a bit of your thing on it, you know. So, and it ends up being a different thing in the end, anyway. So
yeah, and that's got original vocals, Nicky Mack. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah, who, funnily enough, I've actually worked with again recently. Like in the last few months, got a new thing that's not out yet. With Nikki, but yeah, Nikki's a wicked singer, and she worked with Tony DeVee back in the day.
Wow.
She did Feel My Love and another one that escapes me for the minute, but yeah, so that was her sort of her connection to Tidy.
Yeah, and you've had a couple of aliases as well over the years. I've got Azure, Olive Grooves, Street Force, Abandoned. Do you want to tell about some of them?
There's a few, yeah, like so Olive Grooves kind of came about. That's probably the one that I've done the most under.
That's the most like the
apart from Paul Maddox, yeah, like
yeah.
And that was really, it came about because I wanted to make some sort of groovier stuff, because I was playing, I was the warm-up DJ for a couple of the Tidy Boys sort of UK tours. There's Tidy Boys Big Night Out and another one that I forget the name of now. So I was doing the warm-up sets, and there wasn't that much good new, groovier, sort of lower BPM hard house coming out at that point. Like all the Untidy stuff had been out for a little while, and I played loads of that in the warm-up sets, but I didn't just want to do like an hour and a half of Untidy dubs. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like, it's a bit unimaginative, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I was also playing stuff from, you know, like a few funky techno bits, like Ignition Technician and people like that, like a bit of Scott Mack, some of the Dutch stuff. And that was kind of like, you know, some Tall Pull stuff. That was kind of like the makeup of my, you know, couple of hour warm-up set on that tour. And there was just a few gaps in the set, basically. You know, there was sort of, I needed a track to go in between this and that to join it together. And I was like, well, that's what I do, so I'll make one.
Yeah.
But it didn't quite work as a Paul Maddox thing, you know, because they were a bit more tracky. They were a bit less, you know, by design, they weren't quite as, you know, big riffs and big drops and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, we needed a new alias for it. And I lived, or I might have just moved out of actually, but in a house on Olive Grove Road in Sheffield at the time. So that's where Olive Grooves came from.
Yeah. Comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, dropping knowledge, dropping bombs now.
So yeah, people. I doubt people are going to go and start stealing the sign like Penny Lane or something. But it'll, you never know.
Yeah, it's not quite Penny Lane, is it?
Not quite, is it?
So back to the Tidy Weekenders. I mean, from my memory, as much as they were fantastic, one of the highlights was Tidy TV. And you got up to some fantastic exploits on there. Do you remember some of the highlights?
It was funny. I always enjoy doing it. I'm not the most comfortable person on camera sometimes, but I think they kind of, obviously because the main intention of it is to be funny, I think they kind of worked with that. And the one that sticks in my memory, to be honest, is the At Home with the Tidy Boys one, where we kind of did it was sort of like a Louis Theroux's Weird Weekends type vibe, but with sort of me as the Louis Theroux and the Tidy Boys as the like the sort of weird people that we went to visit. So it was like, I can't remember whose house it was that they did it in now, but it was like, it was somebody who worked Tidy at the time. It might have been Alec Mills actually, but it was something like, basically it wasn't Andy Ramo's house obviously, but then sort of the sort of conceit was that it was this they lived together in this house with Darren the driver as their butler, and it was all sort of quite weird and stilted, but I think that was like part of what made it good, to be honest.
What was it like working with Andy? I mean, Andy's like the straight guy, isn't he? But Amo's just a fucking he's a a comedy fucking genius, really.
He is. They're so funny people. I mean, Amo's a funny man in both senses of the word, but he is, genuinely. It was a genuine pleasure working up at Tidy back in the day. Like whilst, that era had passed and it was time to go on and do other stuff. It was, they are good. They were good times working in the office with all those people. And Lee Haslam as well, great guy, was there every day. Yeah.
So do you not have any involvement with Tidy now? Is that just kind of?
Do you know what? I'm still involved with them, but I think there was a point in time where they didn't really need an in-house person anymore, so it was just the right point for me to go off and start, doing my own thing. But I never stopped working with them. I stopped being an employee, but, I've always done music for them. I've always done bits of work for them here and there. So, we've always had a good relationship. It just sort of, just evolved from being an employee, an apprentice to just, somebody who they work with. Yeah. And they've actually just set up new offices in and studios over at a place called Tileyard North in Wakefield. So I've been over there a little bit more recently, actually, because it's not too far from me now. And it's nice. It's kind of, we were saying the other day, sort of we were there. Andy was in because he's not in every day. Lee Haslam was there. Ben Stevens was like, it's like the olden days.
The old boys reunion.
A bit less hair and a few more wrinkles on the faces, but it's it was very much the same vibe, which was nice.
Don't forget, you can catch me each and every Thursday night for my show, Absolute Old School, only on In Demand Radio, where I play you 2 hours of classics and a feast of forgotten gems, usually on the harder side of the spectrum. We kick off with the early 90s every week, and then we have the trance flashback section, followed by the spotlight section. In the past, we've featured clubs and events like Kinetic, The Drome, Good Grief, labels like Tidy Trax, Bonsai and Shock, and artists such as Ultrasonic, Tony DeVee and Scott Brown. We always finish off nice and tough with the Go Hard or Go Home section. You can catch it on In Demand Radio Thursday nights from 11 p.m. or listen back absolutely free of charge on indemandradio.com or download the free In Demand Radio app for Apple or Android. Fantastic. So moving slightly forward, Richard Wakely and Spektre.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Because you've had some fantastic, arguably bigger success with this venture than you did with the Paul Maddox hard house side of things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for sure. So, I mean, I still talk about it as if it's like a relatively new project because, I mean, compared to the Tidy stuff, it is. But I mean, we started it more than 15 years ago now. So, I mean, it's not that new, really. Basically, Rich was really good friends with Charlie from Jazz and Charlie. Okay. Well, we were friends with both of them. I was good friends with Charlie. And basically, I'd kind of got to a point where I wouldn't say bored of hard house, but I felt like I'd kind of done what I could within it, And one thing, as much as I love the hard house scene, it isn't the best one for people wanting experimental music. It kind of has its thing and people do that thing and that's what people like, which is fine. But, I'd got to that point as a producer where I wanted to sort of push outside that envelope a little bit. And it wasn't always that well received with I'd do an EP with like some experimental track that I thought was amazing and just like a straight up banger and everyone
it.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's fine. I think now I'm kind of a bit more at peace with that it is what it is. But at the time, I was probably in my early 20s and I was like, I want to do something more experimental, sort of a bit more sort of ambitious. And Rich was in a very similar boat, but with Electro House. He'd been doing the Electro House thing for, a good few years and had some really good success in that scene. But again, had got a bit bored of it. It'd become quite formulaic. He just sort of felt like he'd done everything he could within that bracket. Charlie, just having known both of us, we didn't know each other at this point, but Charlie basically said, you guys are in basically the same position. You should work together and just do something.
Set it up on a date, basically.
Exactly that. Yeah. Rich came round to my old studio, a different house in Sheffield, and we literally the track we wrote in that first session ended up coming out on Dance Ejay, which was quite a big underground label at the time, and we didn't stop from that point on. Really, we did that one session, did one or maybe even 2 tracks in those first couple of days. And then went on to, over the sort of following 5 years or so, sort of went from it being like a side project to it being both of our main endeavor really quite quickly.
So what's your setup now, or at this point? It's about 2005, 2006 ish.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think when the first Spektre release was. I think 2005. Yeah, maybe even 4. But yeah, it was around about then.
So what's your setup then? Is it still software based, or have you started using hardware into the equation?
So I'd kind of probably So the setup in the Tidy days was quite hardware heavy because I moved into this studio that wasn't mine, but that was really, really well equipped. So the Tidy Studio 3 at Music Factory, the Tidy Studio, was an amazing MIDI studio. Couple of Akai S3000s, loads of old Roland gear, Juno 106, Juno 60, SH 101, SH 09, JP 8000, Nord lead. Like it was a if you sort of ticked all the boxes that you would want on a sort of like early 2000s dance music studio, it was all there, like racks of nice outboard and stuff. So I went quite hardware based at that point because that was what the setup was. But probably by 2005, I'd moved back. Firstly, I had my own studio again, and setting up a studio of that kind of like caliber hardware wise would have cost a lot of money, which I didn't have. But also software had moved on a bit to the point where you could just about do a lot of stuff in the box. Like synths weren't anywhere near as good as they are now, but sampling and stuff, there was no point using like outboard samplers at this point. Contact was a thing, battery was a thing, and they were pretty good and pretty reliable and much easier to deal with than hardware samplers, just from an admin point of view. So yeah, it would have been a PC running probably Cubase. I used Cakewalk and whatever that turned into for a bit, and then moved to Cubase, and then eventually moved to Ableton. But it would have been Cubase at that point, I think, the early Spektre stuff. With like the Native Instrument stuff, Contact, battery, and then I had a couple of synths. I had a Nord Lead 3 and possibly an Ovation Nova at that point. I forget what, because I've always sort of bought stuff, sold stuff, like moved stuff along. But like, there's definitely a couple of Spektre tracks that have got the Nord on, so I definitely had that around that era. Possibly a Virus as well, but yeah. But it was kind of a mainly software setup with a couple of synths, basically, in short.
What about Rich? Was he on the same software as yourself, or did you have to?
So Rich has always been a DJ first and a producer second. So we always did the Spektre stuff at my at my studio, wherever that was at whatever point in time. Because he worked with engineers on his Filthy Rich stuff. Various people, so he always put ideas together himself, but then worked with somebody else from the more technical point of view on it. Yeah.
So when did you realise that this was developing into more of a thing? Because obviously you said it was a bit of a side project, and as we've alluded to, then arguably you've had more success with the Spektre side of things than you did with the hard house.
Definitely.
So when did it kind of evolve and change? When did you realise it was going to be as big as it is now?
To be honest, it all happened step by step. Like we never really, whatever level you're at, you never realise the next one's going to be there, really. Yeah. So, but yeah, when we started, something just fell over. When we started doing, we had some tracks on some quite good labels straight away, and this was pre everything being social media dominated. So if you're an act and you've had some good releases on some good labels, that immediately generates a bit of interest in terms of bookings. So which was great. So Rich's manager and agent at the time, Sasha at Ideal DJs, took us on as well because that seemed like a logical step. And yeah, we started getting a few decent bookings. Like we did Dirty Disco in Leeds, Stylus, which was one of the first bigger ones we did. And then the international stuff started coming, which is something I'd never really done with hard house because it's quite a UK-based scene. It's a very UK-based scene. Like you do the odd gig in Australia. There used to be a few bits in the Netherlands actually, which is coming back slightly. But it was very UK-based. Even when I was really, busy doing Paul Maddox gigs every weekend, it was up and down the motorway. The internationals were few and far between. I probably did like 8 or 9 in the whole. Between 2000 and 2010, probably.
It's a more northern-based music as well. I'd say.
Thing is, it was actually, I'd say at that point, it was quite nationwide, actually. I did quite a few bits in London, did Convergence, which was one of Frantic's events at Egg in London quite often. Did Hard Ass Academy at Brixton Academy, as was Coco now. And quite a lot of stuff all around, like did Bristol, South Wales, South Coast, like West Country. So it was quite, even quite a bit in like East Anglia as well. I'm sure we did like, Ipswich and Norwich and places like that as well. So, don't get me wrong, they weren't the big your Sunday Essentials and stuff were the big super clubs tended to be the North and London, basically. But there was little, 300-400 cat clubs all over the country at that point in time.
Yeah, it was like the Storm as well, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I guess it's more Midlands and North, I suppose. Yeah, like Birmingham was always big as well. Like I was resident at Polysexual for quite a bit, sort of in the probably around the 2004-ish kind of era, and that was that was always a wicked night too. So, but it was really national, but it wasn't international. That was the one thing. I think I did one Australia tour, Australia, New Zealand, did Japan once, which is a crazy one. And. But they were it was really unusual when you'd get an international booking in the Hard House thing. Whereas with Spektre, the sound that we were making, all the labels that we were releasing on were mainly German, really. German, and one of them was Spanish. So obviously, a lot of those, we started getting bookings in, like similar sized clubs to what I was doing with the Paul Maddox stuff, but in, Cologne and Munich and Frankfurt and Berlin and stuff. So that was really cool because obviously I'd never really done that. And I hadn't traveled that much, like as a sort of someone who, I was in my early 20s at that point. I'd done a few Ibiza holidays, a few mates holidays and stuff like that. And, school trip to France. And that was about
Colombo in Wales.
Yeah, exactly. So to suddenly be, traveling, doing, gigs in Europe every week or every couple of weeks was, it was a cool period in time, definitely.
So for those who don't know and haven't done the research, Spektre is, would you be comfortable saying it's techno?
100%. Yeah. I mean, when we first started, it was more minimal techno. But that we sort of evolved out of that. And I would say we've been a straight up techno act for probably the vast majority of it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite a varied techno. I had a little dabble over the past couple of days, obviously doing research, very, very studious guy, doing research. And I watched the Cornwall video, which I thought was fantastic. I thought the opening shot with the drone was fantastic.
Yeah, well, do you know what that came about? So that was done in lockdown, or sort of in the bit where you were sort of semi-lockdown. Anyway, it was during COVID restrictions, let's say. And we kind of just wanted. Firstly, we wanted something to do. We wanted to do something. And secondly, we wanted to do something to sort of keep engaged with our fans a little bit. Because we didn't have any gigs. There wasn't really much you could do, and people were doing these sort of live streams. Obviously, it wasn't really live, but it was, we performed it live and then edited it and put it out, So a friend of ours, Tom Laws, who's released on Respect, our label, he's based down there. And someone he knew owned this bed and breakfast, which is the building that you see on the videos. And they didn't have any guests in because they weren't allowed to. Lockdown, and it's in this beautiful setting in Port Leven on the Cornish coast. So we sort of set all this up, got someone in with the sound system, and we were, and some other friends of theirs were going to shoot it. And we really wanted to get some drone footage because it's such a beautiful place, and we were just like, it would look so cool, like it would really sort of elevate the thing. So sort of asked around and got a couple of quotes off people, which were quite expensive because, good drone operators and good, people who can do that, they charge a lot for their services because they're good at it. And then another friend of a friend down there, it turned out that this guy was a National Geographic videographer, but he'd also done things like the UEFA Cup final and things like this, like proper top of his game. Lived round the corner from the site we were doing that and loves techno. He's like, yeah, I'll come down and do it. He didn't do it for free, but he did it for like a lot less than his normal thing. So and was buzzing off it. So there was a kind of a bit of a, obviously it was a bit of a shit time in general not just for people in the music industry, for everybody. But it did open up a few little opportunities like that because obviously a day in the summer, he normally would have been like in the Andes shooting like vultures or doing some sports event or whatever, but he was sat at home twiddling his thumbs, So it was, turned out quite well in the end.
I think lockdown I've had this conversation on and off the podcast. It was a scary time because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what the future held. As a regular, I'm not a 9 to 5, but I work at a factory. I didn't know if I was still going to have a job.
It was bad times.
Oh, it was. However, as you've alluded to there was a lot of positives came from it. I wouldn't be having this conversation with you now if it wasn't for lockdown, because lockdown was the time when I went, okay, I've got time on my hands now. I'm not going to work 8, 9, 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
I'll get my decks back out. I came up with this brand, Couture 303. Which became a podcast, which is where we are today. I think this is episode, I'm going to say 39, something like that.
Yeah, nice.
And I've spoke to legends like Rosala and Slipmat and Vibes and Lively and I spoke to local DJs and obviously people like yourself who I've never met, but I've seen, perform many, many times in different venues. And all that came about basically because of COVID. If it wasn't for COVID,
it definitely gave people a lot of opportunity to like pursue things that they wanted to pursue but didn't have the time,
exactly,
or didn't want to take the risk was the other thing. Because obviously, if you're working whatever job you're working, like just sacking your job off to go and like follow your dreams seems like a nice idea, and it's it's a cool idea when you're 18. But like once you're a grown up, you've got responsibilities. You've got a house, you've got a mortgage, you've got kids, whatever. It's like you can't just suddenly sack the thing that's paying for all that off to go and do something else. So it gave a lot of people that freedom.
It gave me the head start. Obviously, as you just said there, I wouldn't have had the time to start a podcast while I was working, and I wouldn't have had the time to think about it. And the podcast for me came about in a really organic way. I know my listeners will know this, but I came out with the brand Couture 303, which was t-shirts. Yeah, and I got some people to wear them. I got the legendary Stu Allen before he passed to wear one of my t-shirts. DJ Demand, Tate from Awesome 3, Sharky, Slipmat.
Nice.
Vibes, Lively, and local DJs as well. And off the back of the t-shirts, I was working. I'd got a gig for the night called Back to the Dock. So the Dock was a hardcore night in Liverpool in the late 90s, which obviously closed down, hardcore went. And then Back to the Dock, a guy called Lee was running this night called Back to the Dock. And I said, I'll interview you. I'll do a little interview and I'll put it on my website, which was the website for the t-shirts. I was doing t-shirts at the time. I did this interview. And the interview was awful through no fault of Lee's. I just didn't know what I was doing. We had a little handheld recorder. I had questions on my phone. So I'm sitting there, I'm talking to him and I'm going like that. It was awful. And I felt bad for Lee because it wasn't his fault, but it was bad because of me. And I went away and I thought, I need to change this. I could do better than that. And then I had a second one and obviously it progressed. And obviously, when you speak to if I went to say Amadeus Mozart and said, "Can you come on my podcast?" and my last guest was MC Wheelie Bin, he's gonna say no.
You've got to build it up. Yeah, totally.
I've had Paul Maddox on. Oh, okay. I've had Dark by Design on as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
It gives you the stepping stone then.
And the thing is, I think it's the same with that in a lot of things. Like it's very much the same in with releasing music. Like if you just come in as an unknown name and start trying to get stuff released on huge labels. It occasionally happens. Like if you've made something absolutely outstanding, sometimes it will happen. But it's a lot easier to go to like big label and say, I've already had 3 successful releases on these smaller labels. And they're like, okay, you've kind of proved yourself, So that's it's much the same thing.
There was a guy I used to work with years ago, Tristan Corb, I think his name is, and he was making techno, and he had the same kind of deal. He was making tracks, and they were really, really good. I can't remember which label it was now, but the label it was in question said to him, "You're good enough now. However, you need to go and get 3 releases on any of these labels first before we can even." And like you just said, then it makes it more easy to digest rather than this overnight success of this guy that no one's heard of.
And I think it makes you a bit less of an unknown quantity as well, because it's less of a risk because, if these, if you've had releases on the smaller labels and they've done okay, then at least the big label, then they've got a following, they've got people who follow their music, they've got somewhere with it. So I get
a head start, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
So what would you say your biggest success with Spektre was? Obviously, I know you had some fantastic feedback off the likes of fucking Carl Cox and Adam Bay and stuff like that. Yeah,
in terms of music, there's probably 2 points. So quite early on, like I couldn't tell you the year now, but we did a remix track called PSU Rock by Mark DePulse that our remix got to the overall #1 on Beatport, which is before there was much, before all the big EDM stuff was on there, to be fair. So it was like not quite such a hard task as it would be now. And then more recently, probably like 7 years ago, something like that, we had a solo track called Back Into Consciousness that was #1 in Techno, which they were both music-wise, they were both big moments for us. And gigs-wise, probably the peak was like, I mean, we're still gigging now, but I think the peak in terms of the size of shows and stuff we were doing was probably around the sort of like 2010, 2012 mark. And we did few shows like Hyperspace in Budapest, which was, I think, 14,000 or 12,000 people or something in that room, which is like just insane. We've done big shows before, we've done shows thousands, but when you sort of come around the curtain and there's like a sea of people like that, it was like, that's like, it was a step up, definitely, playing on a lineup with like Plastic Man and Adam Bayer. We were like, wow, this is pretty, pretty out there. So yeah, like I say, we're still gigging and still doing stuff now, but I think we've kind of like, hype's a funny thing in the music business, like it sort of comes and goes, and you can be, you can be busy and be doing what you do, but those little moments where you're sort of the buzz of the moment, they tend to be, there's a few people who hang on to it, but I think generally it tends to be, you'll have a couple of years here or a couple of years there that are the absolute peak. But part of working in this business is knowing how to ride those. Do you know what I mean? It's
of course,
how's
your financial side of things now? Is it financially beneficial music for you now? Or?
I don't do anything outside of it, so I'm lucky in that sense that there's that I can do it as a job rather than a hobby, which I realise isn't a luxury that a lot of people have got. But you have to work at it. Like DJing is so unreliable. Obviously, if you get to that point where you've got the phone's ringing off the hook and your agent's job is picking which ones you say yes to, which ones you say no to, you're fine at that point. At least for that period in time.
Yeah.
But until you get to that, and we've never quite been there. We've been at the point where we've been doing maybe 3, 4, 5 shows a month, maybe slightly more. But the thing with those is, let's say you've got a Mexico tour that's 4 shows of your 5 shows a month. If one of those drops out, then that makes the whole tour stop being viable. And then you've suddenly gone from having like a pretty decent wedge coming in to fuck all.
Yeah.
And so it's always unreliable, so that's something that you learn to deal with a little bit. And really the way I sort of deal with it is that I do lots of different stuff. So I do engineering and co-production and stuff for other people. So I'm sort of working as the engineer with other DJs and other people as the client.
And that harks back to your Tidy days as well. You were doing
totally. I've done that literally since the beginning, so that's always been part of my, sort of mix of work that I've done. But that's a bit nicer in that it's a bit more under your control. I mean, obviously people can cancel and people can move dates and stuff, but it's, generally I work with regular people and, have a good relationship with them. And you kind of know where you're at with that. If you've got a certain number of dates in the diary, you'll pretty much have that, you might get the odd one cancel or whatever. Yeah. And that's a bit more under your control. Whereas, gigs are just so, unreliable. Even if everything's done by the book, you can have 3 or 4 one month and none the month after, so like, and you can't really, I could live like that when I was 18, 19, and I was like paying for a room in a shared house that cost me next to nothing a month. Yeah. But obviously like as an adult, you're like, right, well, I need this per month to survive basically. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think if you diversify a little bit and do different stuff, there's definitely ways of doing it. But I think that is the safe way to do it. Because if you rely solely on just DJing, like have 2 or 3 bad months on the trot and you're in trouble basically. Yeah.
I think it was Ian Redman from Ultrabeat. I had him on last January, and he was talking about gigs. It was either on or off the podcast, and he was saying people don't understand. You get X amount for this gig. And people go, oh, that's a lot of money for an hour. They're not taking into account, A, the time and effort you put into holding your craft in the first place to get to that stage. And B, you might have to, he said, if you're on a flight and that flight gets cancelled or delayed, you could be sat in an airport for 4 or 5 hours. So
definitely.
That price per hour then becomes a price for 5 or 6 hours.
Definitely.
And it becomes not that big of a deal.
Oh, no, totally. Like Rich and I worked this out before. Obviously, there's 2 of us. So like, even after you've taken your agent's commission, your management commission, your tax, all the rest of it off, then you're splitting the rest of it between the 2 of you, which obviously is the only way to do it. Taking all your expenses and stuff out of it. And then let's say that, you're getting however many euros for a 2-hour set in Germany, say. We'll leave the house on Friday morning, not get back till like last thing Saturday night or first thing Saturday morning, last thing Sunday. Yeah. So it's your whole weekend. And we worked out what we get. It's like less than minimum wage for some gigs. If you count all the travel time. And like, don't get me wrong. I'd rather be DJing in Germany than, like packing boxes, obviously. Yeah. But like, it doesn't, the number on paper is not, obviously. And then, when you get DJs who are, earning 5 figures for sets, then obviously at that point, it is a nice living. The people who can make it that. But I've never quite tickled that end of the. You
haven't got your own rider or not like that.
You what? Sorry,
you haven't got your own rider.
No, wait. I mean, I have, but it's like a hotel and some beers, basically. That's basically it. So.
Right, so Paul, we're going to finish off now with some quick fire questions. I've kept you for long enough, and I'm really, really thankful for your time. And it's been a fantastic podcast, by the way. So, Paul Maddox, I will take your first answer and your first answer only.
Right, okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, well, I'll try and not think about them too much, but yeah, all good.
Pineapple on a pizza, yes or no?
No.
Most expensive luxury you bought yourself?
Probably some nice sunglasses, pair of LGR sunglasses. And I've had them for years and I've not broken them, so they're a good investment.
Hey, that's a start, isn't it? You'll sit on them in the car tomorrow now.
Yeah, probably that's it. Yeah, I've cursed it now, yeah.
What do you prefer, DJing or production?
Production. I love both, but yeah, if people have asked me this before, and if I had to give up one, the idea of never DJing again makes me sad. The idea of never making a tune again would make me suicidal. Yeah. So yeah, production all day long.
Bath or shower?
Shower.
What is your favourite insult or swear word?
Do you know what? That's a hard one. I'm like, yeah, I use lots.
Come on, don't be shy.
Don't know. I've not given you a quick answer. I've not got a good answer for that one. Move on.
If you walk into a fully stocked shop, what would be your go-to chocolate bar?
Oh, good question. Probably a Boost. A Boost.
Which one? If you had the choice, which one? Because I'm old school, me.
An original Boost, I reckon.
Well, here's one for you now. We're going to go off topic now. An original
topic,
Boost.
Another good chocolate bar.
Yeah, topics, The original Boost was coconut.
Oh, right. In that case, yeah, no, that's before my time. I don't like coconut chocolate. It's also
you want the biscuit boost.
A biscuit boost, yeah.
We got there in the end. What superhero would you be?
What, an existing one or like a superpower?
It's entirely up to you.
Yeah, I was chatting, but someone asked me this the other day, like, what superpower would you have? We were at a party, and it was one of those sort of early hours of the morning conversations. And I reckon it'd be being able to see into the future, but only by like 20 minutes. Because if you could see all of the future,
you've really limited this, Paul.
Do you know what though? Because if you could see all the future, it'd ruin your life, wouldn't it? There'd be nothing to live for. You'd see it all. It'd be just boring. But just being able to peep like 20 minutes into the future, I reckon that'd be the sweet spot. Yeah. You could win on the horses. You could sort of manage it, but it wouldn't ruin your life. So that's my superpower. 20-minute man. That's what that'd be on me.
Hey, 20 minutes isn't bad.
Not bad, is it?
How would you like your steak?
Rare if it's nice.
What would you say your worst habit was?
Probably, if you ask my girlfriend this, it's probably interrupting people when they're talking.
I'll message you on Instagram after.
Yeah.
On chips, curry or gravy?
Gravy.
Alive or dead, who would you like to spend time in a studio with?
Oh, in the studio, that's an interesting one. Probably. That is a difficult one. In terms of people who've influenced me over the years, the one who I really, really loved and always idolized them from a sort of production point of view was BT. When he was doing the sort of more, he's gone sort of a bit more ambient and soundtracky now, which I don't enjoy as much. But yeah, when he was doing all the Flaming June, Godspeed, that kind of era stuff was my absolute, his stuff was just an absolute cut above what anyone else was doing. So I'd, yeah, he's still alive, but I would like to go back in the studio with BT in 1999.
Yeah. On chips, ketchup or mayonnaise?
If I had to choose between those two, I would pick mayonnaise, but I would probably go brown sauce over either.
Oh, hey, that's a bit further down the question of this. Hang on, hold that thought. What annoys you?
Oh God, fucking everything. I've hit 40 now. Everything annoys me. People walking too slowly. That's probably one of the worst ones. If you
if somewhere busy, loud he's eating over there.
Yeah, loud eaters is another one, to be honest. But yeah, if you're somewhere busy and someone's walking in front of you, they just stop.
Yeah. Oh, people with no spatial awareness. Yeah. Oh, fucking pissing me off. On a bacon balm or bacon on toast, red sauce or brown sauce?
Brown sauce, easy. You knew what that was going to be already.
That one. What are you currently watching on the telly?
What are we watching on TV at the moment? I'm excited. Well, we just caught up on Succession, which we're a little bit behind on that, but that was brilliant. And also just caught up on White Lotus, which we really enjoyed. Neither of those are brand new out, to be honest, but yeah, they're the two that I've watched recently that I've enjoyed the most.
Have you seen Fool Me Once?
No.
Wow.
Is that one for the list?
Well worth a watch.
Sound. I'll put that on.
It's 8 episodes, and up until episode the end of episode 7, you haven't got a fucking clue what's going on. You don't,
Nice.
you just don't, but it's really, really good. Well worth
Although
a
I'm
watch.
also excited, actually, I might have just dropped, actually, the new series of True Detective.
Oh, right, okay. I see the
It's
first
there's a new one out. So the first series of that is one of the best
really good,
series I've ever seen. And I can't remember who's on it, but it's Jodie Foster and another female lead, which is like a good twist on the plot. But
the original was Woody Harrelson. And,
that's the one, the Woody Harrelson and who was it? But
McConaughey.
That's right. Yeah.
What scares you?
That's a good question. I've not got any sort of like obvious phobias. I don't love heights, but I wouldn't say it's a phobia. But I've not really got any sort of like shocking phobias, to be honest. But yeah, probably heights of the common ones. But I'm bad with it rather than terrible. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wouldn't fancy a bungee jump.
The final question: what's the best podcast you've ever been on?
Best podcast I've ever been on? I mean, it's got to be Couture 303.
That's very nice of you to say. Thanks very much, Paul. Well, right, before we go, what have you got coming up then, mate? Any big gigs or any big projects you want to talk about?
So, main thing really, like gigs-wise, well, it was supposed to be the Tidy Weekender again this summer, but obviously they've had the issues with Pontins disappearing. Yeah, so we don't know what's exactly happening with that at the moment. I'm sure they've got. I was chatting with Sam the other day actually, and they're working hard to make something happen, but the exact sort of shape of what that's going to be, we don't know yet. But music wise, we've just had a Spektre release out on Drum Code the other week as part of A-Sides, which is a big one. But the main thing really is actually I've kind of started putting a little bit more energy back into the hard house thing again, a little bit, because there's I realise you're wrapping up, so I'll try and not waffle on.
No, it's okay. You take your time, mate.
But seeing like there's a lot of DJs that are a generation younger than myself, coming up and sort of getting back into all the old hard house stuff again. There's like Marlon Hofstadt playing old BK records and, loads of these DJs that are in the age I was when I first got into it, playing all those old records and getting a buzz about it again. And just seeing that happen has got me kind of quite excited about making some again. So I'm actually starting a new little label, just doing my own stuff, putting it out there, see what happens, just like a Bandcamp and streaming label. Called Same Old Stories, just because a little bit tongue-in-cheek of it being, the old stuff coming back round. So I've been busy with that. So that's probably going to be launching spring-ish. I haven't set a permanent date yet, but I would imagine it'll be sort of like, end of quarter 1, start of quarter 2 this year. So it'll be, sort of tracks from myself and probably a few old friends and new collaborators. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Same Old Stories.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So Paul,
all good,
it's
mate.
been
Thank
an absolute pleasure, mate. It really has.
All good.
Thank you for your stories. Thank you for your humour. Thank you for your insight, and thank you for coming on the podcast on this.
Thank you very much, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Rather chilly January morning. I'm sure you've got better things to be doing, but I really appreciate your time.
No, mate, it's all good. It's all good. It's got me out of bed on a Monday morning. To be honest, I'd have been tossing it off, looking for reasons not to do any work at this point on a Monday otherwise. So it's all good.
Right, thank you very much for tuning in, guys.
Cheers,
I hope
pal.
you enjoyed the podcast. I don't know, as I always say at the end of every episode, I don't know who or what's next. I've got an idea, and again, I always say that. But thank you for tuning in, and you know where to catch us all on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Ask Alexa, all that kind of good stuff. And I'll see you in about 3 weeks' time. Take care, guys. Thank you very much.